The giant Apache woman challenged all men, and only one silent cowboy was her match in the far reaches of the desert, where the land stretched endlessly and the sun painted the earth in shades of gold and brown. There was a small, dusty town that seemed almost forgotten by the world. The wooden buildings creaked with the wind, and the streets were often empty except for the occasional horse or wandering traveler. But despite its quiet appearance, the town was alive with stories, whispers, and legends, the most famous of which belonged to a woman whose name everyone remembered with a mixture of fear and admiration. She was known as the giant Apache woman, a figure who seemed larger than life, both in size and in spirit. No one in the town knew exactly how she had come to be so strong. Some said it was her heritage, that the desert itself had shaped her into a force of nature. Others believed it was years of training and living by her own rules that made her unstoppable. But everyone agreed on one thing: she was not a woman to be underestimated. She walked with confidence, her long hair flowing in the wind, and her eyes carried a sharpness that could make even the bravest men pause. Her presence alone commanded respect, and her reputation had grown far beyond the town. Stories about her began when she was young. Even as a girl, she was taller and stronger than most of the boys in her village. She could run faster, climb higher, and her aim with a bow was unmatched. People watched in awe as she learned skills that many thought required years of experience. She wasn't violent without reason, but when she stood up for herself or her people, no one could stop her. Tales of her courage traveled quickly, reaching towns far across the desert, and soon, her name became a legend. As she grew older, her strength only increased. She became known for setting challenges, inviting men from all over the region to test their courage against her. But it was more than just physical contests. She challenged them to show bravery, honesty, and respect. Many men arrived with big egos, thinking they could prove themselves by defeating a woman, but each one failed. Some were defeated in tests of skill, others in feats of strength, and a few even in games of strategy that required patience and clever thinking. No matter the task, she seemed always one step ahead, observing every move and learning from each attempt. The townspeople were fascinated. They watched these events from a distance, cheering or whispering among themselves, but always with a sense of awe. Some were afraid of her, believing that anyone who could outmatch so many men must be unstoppable. Others admired her, feeling inspired by her courage and determination. Children would often follow her at a distance, hoping to see her in action, while elders shook their heads, remembering times when she had shown both wisdom and power in ways that left everyone speechless. Despite her legendary status, she was not arrogant. She treated everyone with fairness, speaking kindly to those who tried their best and showing no cruelty to those who failed. Her challenges were never about humiliation. They were about discovering who had the courage to face the unknown, who could respect strength and wisdom, and who could learn from failure. In her eyes, true strength was not just physical. It was the ability to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly when danger approached, and to act with both honor and intelligence. Men who failed often left quietly, some embarrassed, others thoughtful. They carried the stories of their defeat with them, sharing them in neighboring towns. Each story added to the aura of the giant Apache woman. The more people heard about her, the more they wondered if anyone could ever match her. Yet despite all the challenges and victories, she remained humble. She did not seek fame or recognition, but she could not escape it. Her reputation traveled faster than she could, carried by travelers, merchants, and even wandering cowboys who spoke of her as if she were a force of nature rather than a person. The town itself began to change because of her. Traders and visitors came from far and wide, hoping to witness her challenges or simply catch a glimpse of the woman who had become the talk of the desert. Inns and saloons saw more business, and the townspeople adapted to the increasing attention. They respected her, not just because of her strength, but because she had brought a kind of excitement and life to their quiet home. Children grew up hearing her stories, learning lessons of bravery and perseverance. Even the adults, who might have doubted her at first, found themselves inspired by the way she faced every challenge with courage and integrity. Life in the town followed its usual rhythm, but there was always a sense of anticipation whenever a new challenger arrived. People would gather, quietly or openly, to watch as another man attempted to meet her in feats of strength or skill. Some came for glory, others for the simple thrill of seeing if they could succeed where others had failed. And every time, the giant Apache woman met them without fear. She greeted them with a steady gaze and a calm voice, measuring their strength not just in muscles but in spirit. Those who underestimated her quickly learned that they were facing more than a physical challenge. They were facing someone who had honed her mind and body equally, someone who had learned from the desert and from life itself. Even in her moments of solitude, she remained remarkable. She would practice alone, running across the open plains, climbing rocky hills, or perfecting her aim with her bow. She found peace in the quiet moments, understanding that strength came from balance, not just power. Animals in the desert seemed to respect her presence, and travelers sometimes spoke of seeing her quietly moving through the landscape, almost like a shadow, yet commanding attention and respect wherever she went. By the time she reached adulthood, the giant Apache woman had become a symbol. She represented courage, independence, and the idea that strength was not limited by gender or expectation. Her challenges were not meant to belittle others, but to inspire them, to show that the true measure of a person was their heart, their wisdom, and their determination. The story of her early victories, her unmatched skill, and her fair yet firm nature spread far beyond the town, ensuring that her legend would grow with each passing year. It was this combination of size, skill, courage, and wisdom that made her unmatched in the eyes of everyone who met her, or even heard of her. And though many men had tried to prove themselves against her, the legend always ended the same way, with her standing tall, calm, and unshaken, earning not just victory, but respect from everyone who witnessed her power. It was a reputation built not on fear, but on the recognition of what it meant to be truly strong in every sense of the word. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the townspeople would sometimes gather to watch her silhouette against the horizon. There she stood, tall and unwavering, a reminder that strength and courage came from within, and that legends were born not from boasting, but from action, determination, and heart. And in that quiet desert town, the giant Apache woman became more than a person. She became a story, a lesson, and a symbol of what it meant to face life with courage and dignity. Little did anyone know the true test of her strength, the challenge that would change everything, was still on the horizon. A stranger was approaching, unlike any man who had come before, someone quiet, patient, and observant. And when he arrived, the story of the giant Apache woman was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. One by one, men from the surrounding towns began to arrive, each claiming that they could face the giant Apache woman and succeed where others had failed. They came from all walks of life: cowboys with rough hands and determined eyes, ranchers who thought their physical strength would be enough, and even wandering adventurers who had traveled great distances just to test themselves against the legend. Each believed that their own skill, courage, or cleverness would allow them to triumph. But for all of them, reality proved to be far different from their expectations. The first of these challengers was a young rancher named Caleb. He had heard stories of her strength and wanted to prove himself, convinced that a few months of hard labor on his family's farm had prepared him for any contest. When he stepped into the dusty clearing where the challenge would take place, the townspeople gathered around, curious to see if this new man could finally meet the giant Apache woman's strength. Caleb's confidence was evident in the way he stood tall, puffing out his chest. But when the challenge began, it quickly became clear that appearances could be deceiving. The contest was simple, a test of endurance. Caleb had to lift heavy logs and carry them across the uneven terrain of the desert. He had trained for hard work, but he had never faced someone who could match him in both strength and strategy. The giant Apache woman moved with ease, demonstrating a technique that Caleb had never imagined. She lifted, pushed, and pulled with precision, using her body in ways that allowed her to exert less effort while achieving more. Caleb struggled, his arms shaking, his determination giving way to frustration. By the end of the day, he had failed, exhausted and humbled, while she remained steady, her calm gaze showing no hint of satisfaction in his defeat. Next came a young cowboy named Thomas. He believed that speed and agility could give him an advantage, thinking that if he moved faster than the giant Apache woman, he could outmaneuver her. The challenge for Thomas was a race across rocky hills and through the desert sands, a test of both speed and endurance. At first, Thomas darted forward, confident that his quick steps would carry him to victory. But the giant Apache woman was not just strong, she was smart. She anticipated his every move, adjusting her pace and using the terrain to her advantage. When Thomas stumbled over loose rocks or got caught in narrow passes, she remained calm, overtaking him with grace and strength. By the time they reached the finish line, Thomas was exhausted and frustrated, while she stood tall, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable but commanding respect. One after another, men continued to try their luck. Some attempted to challenge her in wrestling matches, thinking sheer size and brute strength would be enough. Others devised clever schemes or tested their skills in games of precision, hoping that cunning and strategy would allow them to succeed. But no matter the approach, the results were the same. The giant Apache woman was always one step ahead. She combined strength with intelligence, power with patience, and courage with foresight. Every attempt to defeat her ended in failure, leaving the men both humbled and amazed. The town became a place of constant anticipation. Every arrival brought excitement and tension. Children would gather along the edges of the clearing, whispering to each other about who might succeed this time. Adults leaned over fences or peeked from windows, eager to witness the challenge firsthand. And through it all, the giant Apache woman remained a figure of calm and dignity. She treated each challenger with fairness, giving them a chance to show their best, but never allowing arrogance or overconfidence to succeed. She understood that pride often blinded people to their own weaknesses, and she used her wisdom as skillfully as she used her strength. One day, a man named Henry came from a distant town, boasting that he had trained his whole life for this very moment. He claimed that he had wrestled bears, lifted massive weights, and survived the harshest conditions imaginable. The townspeople watched, curious to see if this new challenger could finally meet the giant Apache woman's reputation. The contest was a combination of strength and problem-solving. Henry was expected to move boulders, navigate tricky obstacles, and demonstrate his ability to remain calm under pressure. At first, Henry seemed to have an advantage. He was strong and confident, moving quickly and handling some of the obstacles with ease. But the giant Apache woman was patient. She observed his movements, noted his strengths and weaknesses, and adjusted her own approach accordingly. As the challenge progressed, it became clear that Henry was overconfident. He rushed, trying to finish quickly rather than thinking through each step. The giant Apache woman, by contrast, moved steadily and deliberately. When Henry stumbled or made mistakes, she remained composed, completing each task with precision and grace. In the end, he, too, failed, his pride humbled by her skill. The townspeople began to realize that her challenges were not just tests of strength. They were lessons in humility, perseverance, and respect. Each failure, though disappointing for the challengers, taught an important lesson. Strength alone was not enough. True courage required intelligence, patience, and the ability to stay calm in the face of difficulty. The giant Apache woman had mastered these qualities, and she expected the same from those who wished to meet her in competition. Over time, stories of the failed challengers began to spread beyond the town. Travelers returning home told tales of the giant Apache woman's strength, her wisdom, and her unwavering calm. They spoke of men who had arrived full of confidence and left humbled, carrying with them not only the memory of their defeat, but also a deep respect for the woman who had bested them. These stories added to her legend, making her even more famous in distant towns and villages. Despite the growing legend, the giant Apache woman remained grounded. She did not boast about her victories or belittle those who failed. Instead, she continued to train, practice, and refine her skills. She found joy in the challenges themselves, in the opportunity to test her abilities, and in the respect she earned from those who truly understood what it meant to face adversity with courage and dignity. Children in the town began to look up to her as a role model. They admired her strength, but they also admired her fairness, her wisdom, and her calm demeanor. Even the adults who had once doubted her began to see the lessons she embodied. That courage was not just about physical power, that true strength required both mind and body, and that respect and humility were as important as skill and determination. As the weeks and months passed, it became clear that the giant Apache woman had achieved something remarkable. She had not only proven her own strength, but had inspired an entire community. The town became known far and wide as the place where the legendary giant Apache woman lived, where men came to test themselves, and where lessons of courage, respect, and perseverance were learned. Yet for all her victories, she remained alert and aware that her greatest challenge might still lie ahead. She had faced countless men, each with their own skills and strengths, but she sensed that one day someone would arrive who was different, someone who might not be defeated so easily. And though she had no way of knowing who that person would be, she welcomed the idea of a challenge that would test her in ways she had never imagined. For now, she continued her life in the town, training, observing, and challenging those who came to meet her. Her presence was a constant reminder that true strength was multifaceted, combining courage, wisdom, patience, and respect. And as the sun rose and set over the desert, the legend of the giant Apache woman grew with each passing day, her story inspiring those who watched, those who tried, and those who would one day face her in the future. The men who failed began to tell their own stories, not just of her strength, but of the lessons they had learned. They spoke of humility, strategy, patience, and the realization that courage was more than showing force. It was understanding oneself and facing challenges with honesty and respect. These stories spread further than her physical presence, adding to the legend and reinforcing the idea that the giant Apache woman was more than a mere competitor. She was a teacher, a symbol, and a force of nature that no one could ignore. And so the town waited, watched, and whispered, knowing that each new challenger brought excitement and hope, even if it ended in failure. The giant Apache woman remained the center of their attention, a living legend who had transformed their quiet town into a place of wonder, admiration, and anticipation. Her story was far from over, and the desert seemed to hum with the promise of challenges yet to come, adventures yet to unfold, and the arrival of someone who might finally match her in ways that no one could imagine. One warm morning, the quiet desert town was stirred by the arrival of a stranger. Unlike the previous challengers, this man did not announce his coming with loud claims or boastful words. He rode a plain brown horse, its coat dusty from long travel, and wore simple clothes that showed little about who he was or where he came from. The townspeople noticed him immediately, for he had a calm presence that stood out against the nervous energy that always accompanied challengers. He moved slowly, observing his surroundings, yet there was an unmistakable confidence in the way he carried himself. Word of his arrival spread quickly, and curiosity filled the town. The giant Apache woman who had grown used to visitors trying to challenge her noticed him from a distance. She was intrigued by the difference in this man. He did not shout or boast, nor did he rush toward her. Instead, he seemed to study the town, the terrain, and even her from afar, as if he was learning everything before making a move. This calm observation was unlike anything she had seen before. Most challengers acted with urgency and pride, and their actions often revealed their weaknesses. But this silent cowboy, so the townspeople began to call him, moved with thoughtfulness and patience. The first impression he made on her was simple yet powerful. He did not underestimate her. He did not approach with arrogance or expectation of victory. Instead, he approached with quiet respect, a quality that immediately set him apart. The giant Apache woman had faced countless men who believed they were superior, only to be humbled by her strength and skill. Yet this man carried no ego, no rush, no desperation to prove himself. He seemed confident, but in a different way, an inner confidence that did not require display or loud words. When he finally stepped forward and spoke to her, his voice was calm and steady. He introduced himself only briefly, not to impress, but simply to acknowledge who he was. The townspeople listened, holding their breath. Would he challenge her directly? Would he attempt to prove himself with some bold act? Instead, he made a gesture of respect, bowing slightly and nodding toward her. The giant Apache woman studied him carefully, sensing a difference she had not seen in any other man. She could feel that he was patient, aware, and capable of understanding her in a way few others could. The challenge began, not with haste but with careful observation. Unlike previous challengers who often rushed to show their strength, the silent cowboy took the time to watch her movements. He noticed how she balanced her body, how she used her strength with precision, and how she thought ahead. He did not try to impress her with feats of power or speed immediately. Instead, he prepared, learning from her every step. The giant Apache woman found herself intrigued. For the first time in many months, she faced someone who did not make obvious mistakes, someone whose patience and attention could rival her own skill. The first task was simple but revealing, a test of strength and coordination. The giant Apache woman lifted heavy logs, moved rocks, and demonstrated the techniques she had mastered over the years. The silent cowboy did not rush forward or act recklessly. Instead, he studied her approach, then carefully mirrored her movements in his own way. He was not as strong at first glance, but his method was precise, efficient, and thoughtful. The townspeople watched in amazement. No one had ever seen someone approach her challenges with such calm and deliberate intelligence. As the day progressed, it became clear that this cowboy was unlike anyone else. He was not trying to dominate or outshine her. He was matching her with skill, patience, and observation. Where previous challengers had rushed or acted impulsively, he remained composed, analyzing every move and learning from it. The giant Apache woman realized that he was not just physically capable. He possessed a mind as sharp as her own, able to anticipate and adapt. For the first time, she faced a man who could truly be her match in more than just strength. By midday, the townspeople began to whisper among themselves. They had seen countless men fail, and most expected this silent cowboy to fail as well. Yet he moved with a quiet confidence that made it impossible to predict his next action. He seemed to understand the challenges in ways that others had never grasped. His calmness was not weakness, it was power. The giant Apache woman felt a mixture of curiosity and excitement. She had faced strong men, clever men, and even skilled men, but never someone who combined patience, observation, and quiet determination so effectively. The next part of the challenge tested speed and agility. The giant Apache woman set up an obstacle course across rocky hills and desert sand. She moved gracefully, her long legs carrying her with strength and precision. Previous challengers had stumbled and fallen, but the silent cowboy approached slowly, analyzing the course and planning his steps. He did not rush. He did not act hastily. Step by step, he navigated the terrain, matching her pace in his own way. Though his movements were quieter and less forceful, they were just as effective. For the first time, the giant Apache woman faced someone who could keep up without exerting unnecessary energy or showing frustration. By the afternoon, the challenges became even more complex. The giant Apache woman introduced tasks that required problem-solving and quick thinking. Previous challengers had often faltered here, as their strength alone could not overcome the obstacles. But the silent cowboy moved with focus, carefully observing patterns, thinking ahead, and making choices that revealed both intelligence and patience. He adapted to her strategies, learning from her methods while maintaining his own approach. The townspeople watched in stunned silence, realizing that this man might be the first to truly meet her in a test of skill, strength, and mind. As the day wore on, an unspoken bond seemed to form between them. The giant Apache woman began to respect the silent cowboy not just for his abilities, but for his demeanor. He did not seek to compete for the sake of pride or recognition. He was there to face the challenge honestly, fully aware of the risks and expectations. She, in turn, recognized his determination, patience, and understanding. This mutual respect grew quietly, through actions rather than words, creating a connection that the townspeople could sense but not fully understand. By evening, both were exhausted but still focused. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. The giant Apache woman, who had never faced anyone able to maintain pace with her for an entire day, felt a mixture of surprise and admiration. The silent cowboy, despite fatigue, remained steady and unshaken. It was clear to everyone watching that he was different from the challengers who had come before. He was not trying to prove something to the town, or to her, or even to himself. He was simply meeting the challenge with honesty, patience, and determination. The townspeople began to understand why this encounter was unlike any other. The giant Apache woman had defeated countless men, but here was someone who did not seek to dominate her. Instead, he mirrored her approach, respected her skill, and demonstrated that strength was not only about muscle, but about mind, heart, and patience. They whispered among themselves, realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This was not just another failed attempt. It was a moment that might redefine the legend itself. As night approached, a quiet sense of anticipation filled the air. The giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy faced each other in the fading light, both aware that the true test had only just begun. The townspeople held their breath, unsure what would happen next, but certain that they were witnessing history. This was the first time the giant Apache woman faced someone who could meet her, not in a single task, not in a momentary display of strength, but across the full range of her abilities. For the first time in years, she felt challenged in a way that was exciting, humbling, and deeply engaging. The night settled over the desert, bringing a cool breeze and a blanket of stars. Both the giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy rested, preparing for the challenges that would come with the next day. They had spent hours observing, moving, and testing themselves, and each had discovered something new about the other. Mutual respect had grown, even in silence, and anticipation for the coming day filled the air. The town slept uneasily, knowing that something remarkable was unfolding, something that might change the story of the giant Apache woman forever. The silent cowboy had arrived quietly, without boast or claim, yet he had already proven something extraordinary. That strength, patience, intelligence, and respect could meet even the most legendary of challenges. The giant Apache woman who had faced so many men and never known defeat now faced someone who could match her not only in skill, but in understanding. The desert, the town, and the quiet people who lived there sensed the shift in energy. A new chapter of the legend was beginning, one that would be remembered far beyond the town, far beyond the desert, and far beyond the stories that had been told for years. The sun rose over the desert, casting golden light across the dusty town. The streets were quiet except for the soft sound of horses' hooves and the whisper of wind through the wooden buildings. Today was different from any other day the townspeople had witnessed. The giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy were preparing for the ultimate challenge, a test that would not only measure strength, skill, and courage, but also patience, intelligence, and respect. Everyone in town sensed the tension in the air, feeling that they were about to witness history. The first part of the challenge was physical, a test of pure strength. Large logs had been set in a clearing, and both the giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy were expected to move them, lift them, and arrange them into a precise formation. The townspeople gathered around, whispering nervously, watching the legendary woman who had never been bested. The giant Apache woman approached the logs with her usual confidence, her movements graceful and controlled. Her muscles flexed as she lifted, rolled, and positioned each piece with precision. The silent cowboy, however, approached differently. He did not try to overpower the logs with brute force. Instead, he observed her technique, noting how she used leverage and balance to manage the heavy wood. He mirrored her actions carefully, finding his own rhythm and moving with a quiet efficiency. The townspeople murmured in surprise. Many had expected him to struggle, yet he moved steadily, matching her pace and skill. For the first time, it seemed that someone could truly meet her in a test of strength. After the logs were arranged, the challenge shifted to agility. A complex obstacle course had been laid out across rocky hills, desert sands, and narrow passages. Previous challengers had stumbled here, overwhelmed by the difficulty of balancing speed, strategy, and endurance. The giant Apache woman moved confidently, her long strides carrying her over obstacles that others would have struggled to climb. Her focus was absolute, her mind calculating every step, every jump, every turn. The silent cowboy followed with a calm determination. He did not try to compete in the same way, rushing to match her pace. Instead, he observed the course carefully, noting the best routes, the safest footholds, and the most efficient ways to navigate the terrain. His movements were deliberate, almost like a dance with the land. Step by step, he kept pace with the giant Apache woman, surprising everyone with his precision and control. By the time they completed the course, it was clear that neither had lost focus or control, and the townspeople erupted in quiet amazement at the display of skill. Next came a test of strategy. The giant Apache woman had devised a series of puzzles and challenges that required quick thinking, observation, and foresight. Previous challengers had failed here, relying too heavily on strength or rushing through the tasks without thinking. But the silent cowboy approached each challenge with patience. He observed her moves, considered the options, and made careful decisions. Where others had been impulsive, he was deliberate. Where others had been loud and confident, he was calm and attentive. The giant Apache woman noticed this immediately. She had faced many men, but none had approached her challenges in such a thoughtful and patient way. Her curiosity grew, and she found herself both challenged and intrigued. Each puzzle and task required not just intelligence, but the ability to stay calm under pressure, a skill both of them had mastered. For hours, they worked through the challenges side by side, moving with respect for each other's abilities, neither one seeking to dominate the other, but both striving to meet the task with excellence. By midday, the challenge had become more complex, combining strength, agility, and strategy. A heavy boulder had to be moved up a steep incline, balanced precisely, and then used to trigger a mechanism that opened a hidden passage. The townspeople watched breathlessly as the giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy worked together, yet subtly competed, each demonstrating skill and ingenuity. The woman lifted the heaviest portion with her unmatched power, while the cowboy used leverage, timing, and technique to move the boulder with equal effectiveness. It was a demonstration of not only physical skill but mutual respect and understanding of each other's abilities. As the day continued, the challenges tested not just body and mind, but courage and adaptability. The giant Apache woman had set tasks that required quick adjustments, thinking on the spot, and the ability to remain calm when plans changed unexpectedly. The silent cowboy met each challenge with a steady hand and clear mind. Where sudden obstacles appeared, he did not panic or force solutions. Instead, he adapted gracefully, learning from her example while applying his own ingenuity. The townspeople could hardly believe their eyes. Never before had they seen such a match, someone who could keep pace, adapt, and respect the legendary woman at the same time. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in. Muscles ached, minds were strained, yet neither of them slowed. They were not competing out of pride or ego alone. They were testing each other, learning from one another, and facing challenges honestly and fully. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert, painting the scene in gold and red. Dust rose from their movements, swirling around them like a golden halo, as if the desert itself had paused to watch this extraordinary contest. At one point, the giant Apache woman attempted a final test of skill and agility, a leap across a gap that few had ever dared to attempt. She moved with power and precision, clearing the distance with ease. The silent cowboy watched carefully, assessing the risk. Then, without hesitation, he made the same leap. He did not rush, he did not falter. He landed smoothly, his balance perfect. The townspeople gasped. Never had they seen someone match her not only in strength but in courage and timing. By sunset, the challenges were complete, and the clearing was quiet except for the soft sound of wind and the heavy breathing of the two competitors. Both stood, exhausted but unbroken. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. There was no winner and no loser in the ordinary sense. Both had given everything they had, both had tested their limits, and both had gained a deep respect for the other. For the first time in many months, the giant Apache woman faced someone who could truly meet her, not just in strength or skill, but in mind, heart, and courage. The townspeople erupted in quiet applause, unable to contain their amazement. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a match of equals, a contest not of dominance but of mutual respect and understanding. Children stared wide-eyed, whispering to each other about the silent cowboy who had matched the legendary woman, while adults nodded in awe, realizing that this day would be remembered for years to come. The desert seemed to hum with recognition, as if the land itself acknowledged the significance of what had just occurred. The giant Apache woman lowered her gaze and smiled, a rare and genuine expression of approval. She had faced countless men, but none had approached her challenges with the combination of skill, patience, intelligence, and respect that this silent cowboy had shown. For the first time, she felt something different: excitement, curiosity, and a sense of fulfillment in meeting someone who could truly match her abilities. The silent cowboy, though quiet as always, nodded in return, acknowledging not just her strength, but the honor of having faced her honestly and fully. Night fell and the desert cooled. The townspeople began to disperse, carrying stories of what they had seen, unable to stop speaking of the extraordinary contest. The giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy remained in the clearing for a moment longer, gazing at the stars. There was no need for words. Their actions had spoken volumes. They had tested each other, learned from one another, and formed a silent bond through the challenges they had faced together. This day would become a turning point in the legend of the giant Apache woman. She had faced many challengers, yet none had matched her in such a complete and profound way. And though the silent cowboy did not seek fame, recognition, or victory in the ordinary sense, he had become a part of her story, a figure who would forever be remembered as the man who could meet her in strength, skill, courage, and respect. As the town settled under the blanket of night, the giant Apache woman felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had faced the ultimate challenge, and in doing so, had found someone who could truly be her equal. The silent cowboy had arrived quietly, without boast or claim, and yet he had proven that patience, intelligence, courage, and respect could match even the most legendary strength. The legend of the giant Apache woman was no longer just a story of unmatched power. It had become a story of honor, mutual respect, and the rare meeting of two extraordinary individuals. The desert night was calm, with a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the sound of distant coyotes calling across the open land. The town was quiet, its streets empty now that the day's extraordinary challenge had ended. Inside their homes, the townspeople whispered to each other, reliving every detail of what they had witnessed. The giant Apache woman facing the silent cowboy in a contest that had tested strength, skill, courage, and patience. No one had expected such a day, and many found themselves awed by what they had seen. The giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy remained at the clearing where their challenge had taken place. They were exhausted, dust-covered, and sweat-streaked, but neither showed signs of defeat. Their eyes met across the distance, and a silent understanding passed between them. It was not about winning or losing. It had never been about that. The contest had been a test of character, respect, and endurance, and in that moment it was clear to both that they had each found someone who could truly match them. For the giant Apache woman, it was a new feeling. She had faced countless challengers in her life, men who had come to test their strength against hers, each expecting to succeed where others had failed. Yet most had fallen short because they underestimated her or overestimated themselves. But the silent cowboy was different. He had approached the challenge with quiet patience, keen observation, and steady courage. He had not rushed or tried to dominate. He had not boasted or sought attention. Instead, he had faced every obstacle with respect and thoughtfulness, qualities that she had long admired but rarely seen in anyone who attempted her challenges. The silent cowboy, too, had felt something rare. He had traveled across vast lands, met countless people, and faced many dangers, but none had prepared him for a challenge like this. He had known of her reputation, had heard the stories of her unmatched strength and skill, yet he approached with a calm mind and steady heart. As he had navigated each task, he had felt a growing sense of respect for her, not just for her power, but for her fairness, intelligence, and courage. Every movement, every decision had been a conversation between them, unspoken but deeply understood. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the giant Apache woman finally spoke. Her voice, calm but strong, carried across the clearing. She acknowledged his skill, his patience, and his respect, admitting that he had met her in a way no one else ever had. It was not a declaration of defeat for her, nor a boast of victory for him. It was a recognition, a mutual acknowledgement of their abilities, their courage, and their character. The townspeople, standing silently at a distance, felt the weight of the moment, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The meeting of equals, bound not by competition alone, but by respect and honor. The silent cowboy responded with a nod, his face calm and unassuming. He did not speak of victory or achievement. Instead, he showed his respect through quiet gestures, straightening a fallen log, brushing dust from the rocks, and offering a small bow toward her. It was a gesture of recognition, acknowledging that the strength and skill she had shown were matched by his own determination, patience, and thoughtfulness. The giant Apache woman smiled, a rare and genuine expression, feeling the weight of her own admiration and respect for him. The townspeople, who had watched with bated breath, began to applaud softly, realizing that this was a victory of a different kind. It was not about one person dominating the other, but about mutual respect and understanding. Children clutched the hands of their parents, eyes wide with wonder, while elders nodded knowingly, recognizing the lessons being taught through this extraordinary encounter. Strength alone was not enough. Courage, patience, intelligence, and respect were equally important. The giant Apache woman had always embodied these qualities, and now, through the silent cowboy, someone else had shown that they could meet her in every way. As night deepened, the two of them sat together near a small fire, sharing water and silence. Words were unnecessary. They had communicated through actions, through the challenge itself, and through the respect they had shown each other. It was a bond formed not through rivalry, but through shared experience, understanding, and courage. In that quiet desert night, there was no need for words to explain what had happened. The story had been written in sweat, effort, and mutual recognition. The next morning, the town was abuzz with stories. Travelers and townspeople alike could not stop talking about the contest, about the silent cowboy who had matched the legendary giant Apache woman. Merchants, innkeepers, and children retold every detail, emphasizing the patience, skill, and respect that had defined the challenge. Unlike previous stories of failure and humiliation, this tale was different. It was not about someone losing to her, but about someone meeting her, earning her respect, and showing that true strength was as much about character as it was about physical ability. The giant Apache woman returned to her daily routines, but something had changed. She had faced someone who could meet her in mind, body, and spirit, and the experience left her feeling both humbled and inspired. Her challenges continued, but the story of the silent cowboy remained with her, a reminder that strength could be matched not through force alone, but through patience, courage, and understanding. She felt a new kind of excitement for life, knowing that challenges could teach not just about victory or defeat, but about connection, respect, and mutual admiration. The silent cowboy, meanwhile, prepared to continue his journey. He had come seeking no fame or reward, only the opportunity to meet the giant Apache woman's challenge honestly. Yet he left the town knowing that he had accomplished something extraordinary. Not in defeating her, but in earning her respect, matching her skill, and forming a silent bond that neither words nor distance could erase. As he rode away, the townspeople watched in awe, understanding that they had witnessed a rare and meaningful event, a meeting of equals who had proven that strength, courage, and respect could coexist in extraordinary ways. Over the years, the story of that encounter spread far and wide. People told of the giant Apache woman who had challenged countless men, and the silent cowboy who had met her as an equal. The tale became a legend, a story not just of strength, but of honor, patience, and understanding. Travelers carried the story to distant lands, children learned it as a lesson in courage and respect, and even adults reflected on its meaning. It was a story that transcended time, showing that the greatest victories were not always measured in physical feats, but in character, courage, and the ability to meet someone with honesty and respect. The town itself changed as well. The challenge had inspired the people, teaching them lessons they would carry for generations. They learned that strength alone was never enough, and that patience, wisdom, and respect could be just as important. Children practiced carefully, learning to balance courage with thoughtfulness, while adults reflected on the ways in which respect and understanding could change the world. The giant Apache woman remained a central figure in their lives, a living legend, but now she shared her story with someone who had truly matched her, a silent cowboy who had arrived quietly, faced the challenge honestly, and left an impression that would never fade. And so, the legend of the giant Apache woman grew even greater. She remained strong, wise, and courageous, but her story now included another extraordinary figure, a man whose patience, observation, and respect had allowed him to meet her in every way. Together, they had shown that true strength was not about domination, pride, or fame, but about character, courage, and the ability to face challenges with honesty and respect. The desert wind seemed to carry their story across the land, whispering it to those who would listen, inspiring generations with a tale of mutual admiration and extraordinary courage. In the end, it was not about who had won or lost. It was about the respect that had been earned, the lessons that had been learned, and the understanding that true strength lay not in defeating others, but in meeting them with courage, honesty, and honor. The giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy had accomplished something remarkable. They had proven that two extraordinary individuals could meet as equals, creating a story that would live on forever in the hearts and minds of those who heard it. As the sun rose over the desert once more, the town basked in the quiet sense of awe and inspiration left by the extraordinary encounter. Children ran through the streets, repeating the story to each other, while adults paused to reflect on the lessons learned. The giant Apache woman stood tall, calm, and proud, knowing that her legend had grown, not just because of her strength, but because of the respect, courage, and understanding that had defined the day. And somewhere on the horizon, the silent cowboy rode onward, carrying the quiet knowledge that he had met a legend, earned her respect, and become part of a story that would endure forever. The story of the giant Apache woman and the silent cowboy became more than a tale of challenge or adventure. It became a lesson in patience, courage, respect, and the extraordinary power of meeting someone as an equal. The town remembered, the desert remembered, and the legend lived on, stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than anyone could have imagined.